afternoon and welcome back. It's amazing that we are on today because I will tell you that Evan, our regular producer of the show, is gone. And Jason had to take over the IT duties for our show today. And amazingly, it looks like it's working.
You know what? I have to say, at this moment, I am very pleased with my performance. And
we make no guarantees that today's show is going to go off the hitch.
Well, or the show may just go on for 7 days straight because I won't be able to figure out how to turn it off when we're done. So
that might happen too.
But huge shout out to Evan. Evan Little, our producer and our insurance guru, for sending me very, very detailed instructions on how to do this. So thank you, Evan. I appreciate it, man. And I'm very pleased that it's working.
I am too. So this is US Home Talk. We're here live every Wednesday at noon and on demand at ushometalk.com and everywhere you find your podcasts. We are hosts. Jason Walgrave, Walgrave Real Estate Group, and the Minnesota Real Estate Team at Remax Advantage Plus. Did your introduction there get longer? It seems like it got longer. No, maybe not. And then Mike Overson here. And then Mike Overson here with Luminate Home Loans. And we typically have Marcus Walgrave with Hegg Realtors on with us as well. Marcus also has a prior obligation, so he's not joining us today. But you guys all know that Marcus usually joins us too from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to enlighten us with all the knowledge he has. So we will be taking all your questions during the show today, anything and everything dealing with real estate. The call-in number is 612-234-7585. Again, 612-234-7585. Or you can also connect with us in the comment section on Facebook. We're also going to be answering your questions that were emailed to us during the week and any other calls that we received during the week as well. Today's topic is, what's my interest rate? Right? Get that question a lot. What's my interest rate? Or where are rates at? Mike, where are rates at? Jason, how many times a week do you get that question?
I get that question at least a dozen times a week, and it's a hard one to answer because there's so many different variables. I usually give a range. I usually say, they're about this with, the good down payment, good credit. But there's a whole bunch of different factors that go into how you come up with your specific interest rate.
There are. And as a real estate agent, obviously that's not your job, right? Yeah, you're involved with, financing on a daily basis, but it's not like you have your pulse. It's not like you have a pricing engine on your end to where you can pull up rates. I have a list here today we're going to cover. There's 17 items on this list. The actual list is actually closer to 30 items that can affect your interest rate. Some of those can get pretty obscure. That's why I brought it down to 17 items, but there's 17 items here that we're going to talk about today that can affect your interest rate. And so we're going to cover this list here. I'm going to start with number one. Number one thing that can affect your interest rate is your loan amount. So what loan amount are you looking to borrow? When it comes to this, your loan amounts on an FHA loan, the loan limits are different than on a conventional loan. And the loan limits on a VA loan are different than what's on a jumbo loan. So each loan type, right, has loan limits. Each loan type has its own interest rate. And so if you're saying, hey, I want to buy a $1.2 million house and I want to borrow $900,000 against it, now you're in the jumbo loan category. That's going to be a different rate versus you coming to me and saying, hey, I want to buy a $500,000 house and I want to put 5% down on a conventional loan. Going to be a different rate. So loan amount is one of those things that changes it. Now, this is an interesting fact, Jason, that you might not even know, is that let's talk about just a standard conventional loan, right? We're a bank, so we have a bank backbone. So we have our federal charter. We can do loans in 46 out of the 50 states, this and that. Because we're a bank, we also have a few different options when it comes to community lending. So as a bank, we're held to some community lending standards from the government. One of those things is that when we get underneath a certain loan amount, our interest rates go down. So for example, I priced one out yesterday, $300,000 loan amount, 5% down conventional deal. That borrower was getting 6.375 on a 30-year fixed conventional loan. Okay. I also priced out a condo for one of my buyers who was only doing a $75,000 loan amount. Her rate was at 5.625.
Wow.
6.375 for the one,
Yeah.
5.625 for the other. And that's because of the loan amount. What the government is trying to do with the community lending is if you're borrowing a lower loan amount, if you have a lower loan amount, what they're assuming is that you're in a classification where they want to try to help provide more affordable housing. And so then you get a slight interest rate reduction there. In this case, it's 0.75%. It's actually a pretty big reduction.
What was the purchase price on that condo?
Condo purchase price was like 120.
Okay.
120, and she wanted to borrow 75,000 against it. So
that's interesting because that was going to be one of my questions. Is do you have minimum loan amounts that you guys kind of have to, or guidelines that you might have? And so that was my question: is do you do loans under $100,000? And so clearly you guys do.
We do. I mean, our typical I think our lowest loan amount we'll go to is 50,000 right now. Okay. It would not surprise me if they change that to like 75,000, but right now it's 50. So that's our minimum loan amount that we'll do.
Sure.
Some, different lenders have different, floors, right? Different basements on the type of loan amount they'll go down to. Some are at 50, some are at 75, some are at 100. So that's kind of the deal there. Next factor, let's talk about down payment amount. Down payment amount can certainly affect the type of interest rate you get. Now, the goofy thing, and Jason knows this, so I'm going to ask the question, but he already knows the answer. The goofy thing is that there's a range, down payment range where your pricing is at the worst. So the question is that what has the worst pricing with it? Would it be someone who has a 5% down payment, someone who has a 10% down payment, someone who has a 20% down payment, or someone who has a 30% down payment? Which one of those down payment ranges would have the worst interest rates?
20% down.
The 20% down one does. Now, everyone listening is like, what are you talking about? Why wouldn't the 5% down, right? Why wouldn't the lowest down payment amount have the highest interest rate? Because it's the riskiest loan because they got the least amount down.
Yep.
The thing you got to remember is that when you have less than 20% down, you have a mortgage insurance policy, also known as PMI, that you got to pay for. That mortgage insurance policy acts on the lender side of thing, almost acts like down payment. So if you're doing a 5% down loan, you're typically getting a mortgage insurance policy that covers 30%.
Okay.
So 30% coverage on the PMI policy, right? 5% down payment. It's almost like you got 35% down in the lender's eyes, because if you default on that loan, that mortgage insurance policy is going to pay the lender 30% of what you originally bought the house for to help cover those costs going through the foreclosure. Right? Once you get to 20% down, there's no mortgage insurance that's required, and the lender can't require mortgage insurance.
Yeah.
So 5% down in the lender's eyes, it's like you got 35% down.
Sure.
On 10% down payment, you got to get a 25% mortgage insurance policy. Again, it's like you got 35% down.
Yep.
You hit 20% down, no, you only have 20% down. It's the riskiest loan for lenders because there's no PMI there.
Yeah, you don't even think about that. You automatically think more money down, better rate.
Right.
And so, but you got to take those factors in.
Right. And everyone's like, well, everyone like the 20% down mark. That's like what everyone wants to get to. And that's because that's when mortgage insurance goes away. It's not because it gives you the best rate.
Right.
That's when mortgage insurance goes away. And that's also why
what's the best rate then?
Like, I don't know, like 40 to 45% down.
40 to 45.
Once you hit like 40% down and more, like really it doesn't change rates anymore. So 40% would be that number on a conventional loan side of things.
Okay.
So, okay. I had a thought there too. I was going to say, I had a thought.
I have a question. So back to the loan amount part real quick. What are the current loan limits for VA, FHA, and conventional here in Minnesota.
Yep. So loan limits can range a little bit. So conventional loan limits can range depending if you're in a high cost area or not. Minnesota, the entire state of Minnesota is not in a high cost area. High cost areas would be, New York. So a lot of the East Coast, right? Heavily populated East Coast, the higher cost of living areas. A lot of the West Coast is in a high cost area. So those are different. Minnesota, the entire state of Minnesota, I actually have my chart up over here. So on a conventional loan for a single unit, $726,200. So condo, single family, or townhouse, $726,200. If you want to buy a duplex in a non-high cost area, you can go up to $929,850. If you want to buy a triplex in a non-high cost area, you can go up to $1,123,900.
Jeez.
And a fourplex, you can go to $1,396,800.
So on the conventional loan limits, when if someone was interested in buying a fourplex, maybe you're looking for something in, by Lake Harriet or Lake Calhoun or South Minneapolis, and it's a really nice fourplex. Can you use the future rental income to qualify for that loan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So if you're going to own or occupy one of the units,
yep,
right, and then you're going to rent out the other three, you can use the market rents. So you can use 75% of what the market rents is from those other units in order to qualify. Okay. Market rents is going to be determined by the appraiser. The appraiser is going to have to fill out a market rent schedule on that appraisal to say, here's the 4 units, right? Maybe the unit you're going to live in is a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, and maybe the other 3 units are all 2-bedroom, 1-bathrooms, or maybe 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, or something like that.
Yeah.
So they'll say, okay, the other units that you're not going to live in, here's the market rents for those. Boom, it's on the appraisal. You can use 75% of what that market rents number is in order to qualify.
So even if you have tenants in place and leases in place, they won't look at those. They'll just look at the market.
They'll look at market rents. Yep.
Okay. Interesting. So if your leases are low, then that strategy or that way of looking at it benefits you.
Will benefit you for sure. Yeah, you'll have more income there. Yep.
Okay. Cool.
So that's how it goes there. If you're in a high cost area, those numbers go up. Like I'm doing a high cost area loan right now for someone in California. They're right outside of Los Angeles. On a single unit out there, $1,089,000 is what you can go to on a single unit.
Jeez.
Here in Minnesota, that number is $726,200.
Which is still a big number. 726 is a big number. I mean,
right.
I feel like it wasn't that too long ago the conventional loan limits were like 417 or something. Or
yeah, 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I think they're 417.
Isn't that crazy? In 4 years, they not quite doubled, but close to doubled.
It went from 417 to 5. Went from 417 to 546. 546 up to like 640 something, and then 640 something up to 726,200. So it jumped up lately, and that's the cost of housing. So how did they come up with that number? They look at the cost of housing, right? They look at the cost of housing for these areas to say, okay, the cost of housing is X, and then they run their loan limits off of that. So that's why in high cost areas they bump those loan limits up, because the cost of housing in those areas is obviously higher than others. So
excellent.
All right, so we covered loan amount, we covered down payment amount. Let's talk about purchase versus refinance versus cash out refinance.
Mm-hmm.
All 3 of those have different rates on them. A purchase loan is probably typically going to have the lowest rates on them. Then it's going to be a rate and term refinance, and then it's going to be a cash out refinance. Okay. Cash out refinance is going to be anywhere between 1/4 to 0.5% higher than the other 2.
Okay.
So again, it's kind of a risk deal, right?
Yep.
And
what are the fees on the cash outs?
80%. 80% on conventional, 80% on FHA, and I even think on jumbos you're even looking at 80% there too.
Okay. What about a VA?
VA cash out, I believe 90%.
90%. Okay.
Yep. They used to go to 100%. Not anymore. I'm pretty sure we're kept at 90% then on a VA cash out.
And the reason they're higher is because your down payment requirements on a purchase are zero down on VA, 3% on FHA, and then, 3.5 on FHA, and then generally, 5 on conventional. You can do a 3 on conventional. So, but I mean, 90% cash out on a VA refi is pretty phenomenal.
Absolutely. And there's no mortgage insurance, right? Because VAs don't have mortgage insurance. So you go up to 90% on a cash out, have no mortgage insurance. So, good. I need some swag. Where's my swag at? Maybe I'll do this. Should I put this on?
No, don't put that on.
All right, moving along. So purchase rate, term, cash out, refinance. We covered that. Secondary financing. Are you going to have a second mortgage that closes simultaneously, or do you have a second mortgage that's going to stay in your house when you close the first mortgage? If that answer is yes, your interest rate on that first mortgage is going to be higher because you have 2 loans, right? You have 2 loans, and the combined loan to value of those 2 loans is higher than just your main loan. And so then you're going to get hit. Again, it's a risk deal. Is it riskier to have a borrower out there that has, 2 loans that equal 90% financed against their house? Or is it riskier to just have someone with 1 loan with a loan of 80% against the value of their house? Yep. So secondary finance does cause your first mortgage to be higher.
But that's if they're done simultaneously. So an alternative would be is you put your 20% down, and then you do a HELOC, home equity line of credit, after the fact up to the 90%.
Yep, you could do that. Okay. Yep. So on the purchase, you could do that. On a refinance, let's say you have a first and a second mortgage on your house currently, and you want to refinance your first mortgage, right? You can do that. You can refinance just your first mortgage, leave that second mortgage in place. But that first mortgage is going to see that there's a second mortgage on your house right now, right? Sure. And so your interest rate on that refinance on that first mortgage is going to be higher because that second mortgage is already in place, and they're going to be able to see that as a lien against your house.
Got it. Okay.
So, item number 5 here: are you going to waive escrows or not? So escrows is where you would include your taxes and insurance into your monthly payment, basically for a lack of a better description there. So if you're going to what's called waive escrows, which means you are not going to include tax and insurance as part of your payment, your interest rate is worse, or you pay a separate fee for that. So you either take a slightly higher interest rate or you pay a separate fee to not escrow.
Okay.
So,
and I suppose that's just, risk analysis, right? I mean, they've determined through data that if you've got your taxes and insurance escrowed, you're less likely to default, or certainly less likely to be late on paying those items, right?
Well, so at that point, the lender has control, right? If the insurance is going to get paid and if the taxes are going to get paid.
Sure.
Right. And that's the collateral on the house. So if you go into default and on the loan and you haven't paid your insurance and that thing burns down, now the collateral is gone. Collateral on the loan is gone. What are you going to do? How are you going to rebuild it? Well, I defaulted on the loan. I don't have the money to rebuild it. I don't have an insurance policy that's going to rebuild the collateral.
Yep.
Lender could be in real big trouble at that point, right?
Yep. Sure.
So they have control over those things. So now if a default situation does happen, they have money sitting in an escrow account that they can grab, and they can pay for insurance and they can pay for taxes so that they don't get, far behind. Whereas if you don't escrow for those, then you're banking on the homeowner to make sure that they keep those things up to speed and pay for those items. Because if a default happens and there's no escrow account, lender's got no money to go onto to help, recover some of their losses.
Right.
So.
Yep. Makes sense.
Big one. What's the number one thing, Jason, that you can think of that might affect your interest rate?
The color of your eyes.
Yes, absolutely.
Credit
score, man. It runs the world. Remember the little map of the world that I drew, freehand drew, and I said, this is what credit affects. Boom. Yeah. Literally almost everything in the world it seems to affect. So credit score is a huge driver of interest rate. So you talk about the minimum credit score on a conventional loan that you can get is 620. The top is 780. So the government has actually pushed that top tier up. Used to be 760, now it's 780. Difference in interest rate between those, it's got to be 1%. You're 6.5 on one, probably 7.5 on the other.
Wow.
And to be honest with you, that's probably the least, the thing that moves the least. The thing that's going to move the most with credit score is your mortgage insurance cost, your PMI cost.
Yep.
huge difference in cost of PMI if you're at a 620 score versus a 780 score.
What about 780 compared to 760 on a rate? I mean,
not that much. Maybe an eighth.
An eighth, okay.
Yeah, it's not going to move the dial a whole lot. But back in the day, Jason, back in the mid 2000s, the 700 score was the score you wanted to get to. As soon as you got to 700 score, you were top tier credit at that point. You could do stated loans, you could do zero down. Like that was what we tried to get everyone to. 700 score in today's world is probably going to yield you an interest rate that's 0.3% higher than someone with a 780 score.
Wow.
It's not the gold standard anymore like it used to be back in the mid 2000s. So, okay, credit score number 7. Are you self-employed or not? That's another thing that can affect it, especially in jumbo loans. Jumbo loans will hit your interest rate a little bit if you're self-employed versus not. Sure. Some loan programs, it doesn't matter. Some it does. That's why it's on the list, because it can affect your rate. And a lot of times on the jumbo loan side of things, that's where self-employed versus not comes into play.
Like quarter point or half point, or what do you stand?
Probably 1/8 to a quarter, something like that. So,
okay.
Nothing crazy, but it's still an adjustment.
Yep, for sure.
Let's talk about debt to income ratio. So your debt to income ratio, how much monthly income do you have coming in that we can use to qualify, and how many monthly payments do you have going out? The ratio between those two is your debt to income ratio. The government came out with new loan level pricing adjustments, LLPAs. Guess what they hit? They hit interest rates for any borrower who has a debt to income ratio that's over 40%. There was 40%. No previous adjustment. 40%. Yeah, there was no adjustment for any sort of debt to income ratio adjustment on interest rates from the government until this last change that came out about 3 weeks ago. Yeah. Now, if you're over 40%, now your interest rate is 1/8% higher.
So is that again, based on risk, calculated based on risk? Is that where those?
Yeah. Yep. You start pushing that debt to income ratio. They probably looked at it and said, okay, it looks like everyone who's over 40, the number of defaults, the percentage of defaults, if your debt to income ratio is over 40, increases. So they probably came back and said that's a risk factor that we have to adjust for now. So now take the exact same borrowers, right? Same credit score, same down payment, same purchase price, same loan amount, everything, but one's at a 42% debt to income ratio and one's at a 38. The one that's at a 42 is going to have a higher interest rate.
Okay, cool.
So, documentation type. Let's talk about documentation type. So this means, Jason, bank statement loans, some of the alternative document loans that are out there. They're called non-QM in today's world. Back in the day, they were called subprime. That's kind of a naughty word that we don't use anymore in the industry because, back in the mid 2000s, it was, subprime loans were the ones that caused the crash and all that. We know that story already. But there are some alternative document loans today, such as bank statement loans and things like that. If you don't have tax returns, W-2s, pay stubs, that type of stuff, your traditional documentation to get a loan done, and you have to go with an alternative doc, which would be like a bank statement loan or something, your interest rate's going to be higher.
Yeah.
It's just what it's going to be.
Yeah.
So is it a primary home, a second home, or investment property? We've seen big changes in interest rates for those. Back in the day, a primary residence and a second home had exactly the same interest rates.
Yep.
Right? So credit score was this. You want to buy a second home? Great. Here's your interest rate. You want to buy a primary home? Okay, same interest rate. Doesn't matter. Pick which one you want to do. In today's world, primary residents still have the lowest interest rates on them. A second home has interest rates that's probably going to be 0.5 to 0.75% higher than our primary residence. And investment properties got hit even harder. You're talking 1 point to 1.5 points higher than what a primary residence is as far as an interest rate goes.
Mm-hmm.
How about this one? Property type.
Mm-hmm.
What type of property are you buying? You buying a condo? You buying a duplex? You're doing a single family house? All three of those are going to have different rates on them. The single family house is going to have the lower one. The condo is probably going to be next. And then the duplex is going to be next. Now, that's true for conventional loans. most conventional loans, there are some exceptions if you meet underneath this income level, right? There's some specialty conventional loans where they don't make adjustments for property type.
Yep.
Or on a conventional loan, if you're buying a condo, if you have 25% or more down, then they don't add that adjustment to it either.
Sure.
But in general, single family versus condo versus duplex, they're all going to have different rates on them just because of the property type.
And would townhome be the same as condo, or would it be more similar to single family?
A true townhouse is
Yep.
the same as a single family.
Okay, so you own the land.
You own the land that's underneath. You own the sliver of land that's underneath your unit. That's a
Yep.
true townhouse. That's treated just like a single family.
Okay, excellent.
Let's see here. Loan program, we kind of covered this too. Conventional versus FHA versus VA versus jumbo versus MHFA versus doctor programs. I can go on and on and on forever because there's a million of them out there. Each loan program can have its own interest rates, can have different interest rates.
Yep, cool.
Income level, touched on this a little bit. Your income level. So there are some specialty conventional loans where if you're underneath a certain income level, certain adjustments go away.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're like in Minnesota here, the Home Possible and Home Ready income limit for the metro area is $94,240. So if the income that you're using to qualify the borrower is underneath $94,240, you get a slight reduction in interest rate and you get a slight reduction on your PMI cost. Let's see here. Oh, fixed versus ARM.
Mm-hmm.
Which one has a higher rate, a fixed rate or an adjustable rate? Which one has the higher interest rates on them?
Fixed does.
Fixed usually does because it's fixed. 30-year fixed, the rate is fixed for 30 years. There's no adjusting of it. Mm-hmm. On an ARM, like a 7-year ARM, your rate is fixed for 7 years, and then it goes adjustable for the remaining 23 years after that. So typically those rates are a little bit lower, on an adjustable rate mortgage versus a fixed. Now, the weird thing that inflation does, and we're seeing this now, and it might even get worse, is that it squeezes the fixed rate and the ARMs together. The fixed rate and the adjustable rate mortgages get squeezed together. I priced one out yesterday where I could get a lower interest rate on a 30-year fix versus a 10-1 ARM for this client.
Wow.
30-year fix is at 6.375, and the 10-year ARM was at 6.5.
Wow.
The 5-year ARM was at 6.125, and the 30-year fix was at 6.375.
Oh my goodness.
Only a 0.25% difference between the two. Right? So that's what we see. That's what we see inflation do. And depending on what happens here the next few months, that might actually reverse. A 5-year ARM might actually be like 6.5, where the 30-year fix might be at 6.25.
Wow.
It's called an inverted yield curve. But so the type of loan you're getting, fixed versus ARM, that could affect it. Your loan term.
So sorry, Mike. So the ARM programs, isn't there a fancy new term for those this year that didn't really take off?
Oh, the hybrid fixed.
I remember I first heard that like 9 months ago, and I'm like, what? Like, oh yeah, we don't call them ARMs anymore. They're called hybrid fixed.
Because they do have a fixed component to them, the first 5 years, first 7 years, whatever, if it's a 5-year, 7-year. Yeah, the old hybrid fixed,
I'm sticking with ARM. That's what I'm sticking with.
Okay. I should bring that back. I might have to make a new flyer or something, just hybrid. New, right? New, and put it in, big caps and stuff. New hybrid fixed.
And you could have a picture of an electric car in the corner or something, or
right. Yeah, something like that.
Loan
term is the next one. So we're on number 15. So this is number 15, loan term. Are you doing a 30-year loan, a 20-year loan, 15, 10? So the term of your loan is going to change your interest rate too. The shorter the term, the lower the interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the other one, discount points. Are you going to pay discount points?
Mm-hmm.
Is the quote you're getting, does that include discount points? The rate you're seeing online, do they in the fine print, do they have, you can get this rate, but it's going to cost you 2.5 in discount points to get down here?
Yep.
You know what I mean? So that's the other thing too. And that's a huge game that obviously a lot of lenders play, especially any sort of lender that advertises online is they'll advertise super low rate, but that's because you're paying major points. You're paying big points somewhere in the fine print.
Yep. And what's the most points that you've seen paid in the last year, for example? Have you had anybody pay, 4, 5, 6 points to buy down the rate?
Six. I had one client last fall that did six. They got 6% back from the seller and seller pays, and used all 6% to buy the interest rate down.
What did they buy down to?
At that point, they bought it down to 5.25%. I think. Rates were at 7.
Yeah, well,
And they bought it down to like 5.25%. I think.
Heck yeah.
You get 6 points today. Rates are closer to, let's say, 6.375, 6.5 today. So you'd probably get down to what, 4.75 maybe, if you had 6 points
on a 30-year.
On a 30-year.
Yeah, I mean that's phenomenal. So I mean, especially now when sellers are more willing to contribute or to make concessions to buyers than they were last summer. I mean, there's ways, folks, that you can get creative to lower and reduce that fixed mortgage interest rate, and buying down the points, having the seller contribute to some or all of that buy down. Those are possibilities right now, and so it's so important to make sure you're working with a top mortgage team and a top real estate team, because these are things that part-time folks probably have no idea about. And it's our job to show you what all of your options are, and all of the possibilities. And then you can make the best choice because you've been given all the options. So.
Yep. It's true. There's a lot of different moving parts out there. There's ways you can structure deals. There's ways that you can use seller concessions to better your position, unless you got someone who's pretty well versed in that stuff. And there's some companies out there, there's some lending companies that don't have discount points. You can't buy the rate down, right? You can use the seller concession to pay for closing costs and these other things, but they don't even give you the opportunity for the lower interest rate if you want to use that money towards buying yourself a lower interest rate. So there's that factor that comes into play as well.
Nice.
So the last one on the list here that I have is the lock term. Do you need to lock your rate for 30 days? Do you need to lock it for 60 days? Do you need to lock it for 90 days? Are you building a new construction house and your house is going to be done 9 months down the road? So now we need to do a 270-day rate lock. All of those are going to have different rates that come with them.
Yep. Typically, the longer the lock, the more or higher the interest rate.
The higher the interest rate, right? Yep. Exactly.
Or you pay for that lock up front. Is that another option?
You can pay the points. Yeah, you can basically pay the points, right, to extend it out. So you can pay the money to hold that rate lock out for 270 days, or you can take an adjustment in the interest rate as well.
Okay.
So
that's good. That's a lot of info, man. I'll tell you what. What are rates looking like today?
Right. So it's funny because you bring that up. So like I had one of my managers back in the day. You actually know him, Eric Mitchell, right?
Oh yeah.
This is his line. He's out in California now. Yeah. His line was, people say, well, yeah, where are rates at today? And he would be like, where do you want them to be? And he'd ask that back because there's all these things, right? You got all these things in here. And it's like, you can always pay points and buy your rate down. If you want a 3.5% interest rate today, I can get it for you.
Yeah.
I can get it for you. You're going to be paying big time points. You know what I mean? You're going to be paying 10, 11 points probably to get a 3.5% interest rate today, but I can get it for you. Yep. So if you want it there, great.
Yeah. Yep. Well, but I think that's important to understand, and because it, and I think in the last 3 months, first quarter of 23, the interest rates have been less of a concern, much less of a concern than they were in September and October. People have just accepted, this is just what they are, and if we can get down to the 5s, that's a bonus, and that's great. But there's options. There's always options out there. You just have to be talking to the right mortgage people, the right mortgage team, so they can show you what all those options are. And who knows? I mean, maybe like I mentioned before, sellers willing to contribute. Maybe you've got a relative that that believes in 30-year fixed rates, and they're going to give you a gift to buy down that rate. So you got options. At the end of the day, folks need a place to live, and it is better to own, it is better to buy than it is to rent in almost all price points. And so you just take a look at what what does it mean for me? What's my monthly payment going to be? Because ultimately, when we're meeting with buyers, it's, yeah, I'm looking for this price range, but the price range is based on the monthly payment. What can I afford? What am I qualified for? What am I comfortable paying? And then we just back it out. And so, as the rates have gone up, the biggest disadvantage has been you're not able to buy as much house, right? Your payment your payment goals really haven't changed much in the last 6 months or year. But instead of being able to buy a $600,000 house, maybe now you can only buy a $500,000 house, and so we had to look at the big picture. It is not just about what the rate is. And there's all these different ways to get a different rate, and so it's important to understand how that works.
Yeah. If payment is your concern, if interest rate is your concern, there's ways to address it. And there's ways to solve that problem and get you to a spot to where you'd be comfortable at. And now we talked about this before too, is that we all think, me, you, and Jason, pretty much everyone here in the office building truly believes that interest rates will be lower and significantly lower coming up here sometime in the next 12 to 24 months. I think we will at some point, in the next 12 to 24 months, we'll hit 5.5, 5.25, maybe even get to the high 4s.
Yeah.
If that's the case, everyone that bought a house, in the end of 2022 and all of 2023, everyone is refinancing at that point, right? Because everyone's going to be somewhere between probably a 6 and a 7.25 interest rate that bought in that time range. They're all going to be refinancing. So your position on that house, your position as far as monthly payments go, will improve when that time comes. And so we always say, you date the rate, but you marry the house. Buy the house today, because the house that you buy today for $400,000, it's going to cost you $425,000 to $440,000 next year. Right? Buy the house today at today's prices. Right? Take today's rate, take today's payment. When you can refinance, you drop that payment, but you saved yourself all that money by buying the house today versus waiting.
And you guys have a fantastic refinance program. Anybody that buys a house, buys a house with you right now, let's say the rates do go down in 6 months. What are you guys offering?
Yeah, so we have a buy now, refinance later program going on. So anyone who does a purchase loan with us, who buys a house and does the purchase loan with us in 2023, we will waive our lender fees on their first refinance that they do with us down the road. There's no time limit on that refinance. So if you buy with us in 2023 and it's 2025 before you refinance, when you come back around to us for the refinance, we'll waive all of our lender fees on that refinance.
Excellent.
So it's very good.
I love it. Now you got to talk for at least 2 more minutes, because I have to read the instructions on how to turn this on.
Oh, I love it. So a lot of information today, obviously, right? We covered this list here. A lot of things can affect interest rates. It seems to be the biggest thing, that people are talking about in the housing market. We spoke about, what's going to happen with home prices. I just do not believe they're going to come down. Our inventory level is so low that with the inventory levels where they're at, where the demand is at, we got pre-approved buyers, just lines of pre-approved buyers. Almost every loan officer out there probably has hundreds of pre-approved buyers, maybe not hundreds, but a lot of pre-approved buyers waiting at the door. So the demand is there, right? These buyers are just waiting for something. They're either waiting for the right house to come along because there's no inventory or limited inventory to look at, or they're waiting for interest rates to hit a certain point, typically, right? So once that happens, right? So once interest rates hit a certain mark, or once more houses do hit the market, it's a feeding frenzy, right? It's like dropping a steak in in the Amazon River, right? Piranhas are just going to be, and they're going to be all over that thing. So that's why we don't believe that home prices are going to go down. That demand and that low inventory is going to keep home prices up, and they're going to go up again this year. What do you think appreciation wise, Jason, if you had to take a guess in Minnesota, our Minnesota market here?
I think a conservative 5% this year.
I think so too.
Conservative number. You could see it as high as 6, 7, 8, depending on the neighborhood. But I run numbers at 4, being ultra conservative. And people are trying to calculate over the next 5 years, but I think it's going to be 5+ in Minnesota.
Yep, I believe so too. And I think you'll find that around the country too. You know, the limited inventory is not just in Minnesota. It's a little bit everywhere.
Yep.
So
for sure. All right, playing exit music.
All right.
Hit that
Thanks
button.
for joining us, everybody. We'll be here every Wednesday at noon, answering your questions, giving you all the latest mortgage real estate news. Appreciate you listening.
See you guys. See you next week.